this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Daniela Walls, National Chair of the Tax Wall Street Party. I am here with Michael Chiotinas, reporting from Athens. Happy end of National Infrastructure Week. We'll get to why that's important later in the show. We are recording this program on the afternoon of the 16th of May 2015. Webster Tarpley is out changing the world history in the Donetsk People's Republic, the DPR for short, and we'll be back next week with a full report. Tonight, he traveled from Donetsk to St. Petersburg for the 15th Likhachev Scientific Conference, the world's largest scholarly, cultural, current affairs meeting in St. Petersburg, Russia, with 220 papers from 30 countries. Tonight is the state reception for the Likhachev conference. You can read Webster's Likhachev paper, his speech that he will present to the scholars and heads of state tonight at www, and I'm going to spell this because it's not spelled like Likhachev, it's spelled differently. It's www.lihachev.ru. lihachev.ru. So, and I have to say, after reading his speech myself, this is one of the all-time great speeches. It's worth the time to sit down with it. Michael, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here. We should also, I think, say that listeners can follow his live tweets every day from his Twitter feed at Webster G. Tarpley and retweet, of course. You can check his Twitter now and see him actually with the Foreign Minister Alexander Kaufman of the Donetsk People's Republic, representing the Tax Wall Street Party.
Yes, that's an important point. Thank you. He's keeping up with the live tweets at Webster G. Tarpley, and please retweet. Brandon Turbeville this week wrote a good piece for Activist Post entitled, "Why Do Bankers Wage War to Stop National Banks?" You can find this article on both our United Front Against Austerity and Tax Wall Street Party Facebook pages. If you haven't followed us yet, then please come find us there. The article is also on activistpost.com. Why do bankers wage war to stop national banks? This article ties into why it's important that Webster's in Donetsk now, and the UFAA Tax Wall Street Party has a representative there. This is a fledgling republic in East Ukraine. It's good to take out a map and see where the DPR is. In the east of Ukraine, this republic has succeeded in doing what's long overdue for us here in America, which is to nationalize their out-of-control banks and put them to use for the people. DPR doesn't have a central bank like we have the Fed, because the nearest central bank is in Kiev, but the DPR is the DPR is a breakaway bloc. It nevertheless had a bunch of big banks that were parasitizing the people and did nothing to improve the place. Didn't help with infrastructure or living standards, just parasites, as banks tend to be.
Yeah, the Donetsk People's Republic is in the stages of putting together a formal government. And we have Webster Tarpley there to advise in their fledgling stages.
Yeah. This is the UFAA and Tax Wall Street Party and Webster changing world history. They've broken away from the Kiev Central Bank and nationalized their private banks. So this is why Brandon points out that NATO's ire is directed at the DPR. Now, Brandon Turbeville suggests that if we suggest that the ire is not only from the oligarchs that controlled the newly nationalized banks, but also the Anglo-American banking cartel that essentially owns the U.S. and NATO countries.
Roger Annis at Counterpunch writes, a nation banking system has been established in the two republics by nationalizing the banks of the billionaire bankers, notably the private bank of the rightist oligarch Igor Kolomoisky.
Yeah, from the rightist. Richest and rightist. Who is Kolomoisky? we should get into that. He's one of the richest men in Ukraine, and he's also been a fervent supporter and contributor to the Euromaidan color revolution cause, as well as the current fascist and neo-Nazi government operating from Kiev, along with Western support.
Kolomoisky was even appointed governor of Dnipropetrovsk.
Good job. I was hoping to get out of the Russian pronunciation today. That was great.
I hope that's correct. Dnipropetrovsk. I will try to cover for you on that, Daniela. As I was saying, he was appointed by the fascist Ukrainian government. Having been nationalized, these banks are now apparently going to be used for investment in infrastructure for the people of the DPR. Webster is going to give us a rundown next Friday of exactly how this is taking shape. And you can read examples of this on his Twitter.
Mm-hmm. This infrastructure is expected to be used for roads and sanitation and other public services, but also for the purposes of industrial infrastructure and transportation. And this will hopefully be a breath of fresh air and an example to the rest of the world, at least in the area of the potential for progress and development by use of a nationalized banking system as opposed to private banking alone, and certainly compared to a privatized central bank like the Federal Reserve.
Well, one thing is for certain, it will become a beacon for the Anglo-American war machine, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it is already, and this is a big point of Turbeville's article.
Yes, this is evidenced by American military involvement and targeting of virtually every other nation across the world without a privatized central bank. It is clear why NATO and the US has stepped up its attempts to destroy the new republic before it even has a chance to take root. There is no mistake that the United States has increased its moves to support the Kiev government in overtaking the DPR. Indeed, providing political cover for fascist forces attempting to destroy the DPR, misrepresenting ceasefire violations as the fault of the separatists, and the arming and training of the Kiev fascist forces have gradually increased over the last several months, I'm afraid.
And with the DPR's recent move, it's no doubt placed itself in the crosshairs of the Anglo-Americans and the war machine, set out to destroy any signs of independence and the use of government and banking for the benefit of the people. We can only wish the best for the people of the DPR, but also be there to advise like we are and lend support, keep them on the right track, tell them they're doing the right thing, be supportive while attempting to stop U.S. involvement in their internal affairs at the same time.
Like the DPR's predecessors, who have had the foresight to nationalize or operate national banks. I'm speaking about places like Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Cuba, or Iran. The same way the DPR is now finding itself in the crosshairs of the NATO war machine, and Webster is there in the middle of the fighting.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, yeah, he's right there in the middle of the fighting. Brandon Turbeville wrote another article that fits in with the article, Why Do Bankers Wage War to Stop National Banks? The complementary article is titled, State-Owned Central Banks Are the Real Target for West Imperial Wars, where he explains the world banking cartel and the governments which they operate through. This is Daniela Walls with Michael Chiotinas. Before the break, I was talking about Brandon Turbeville's two articles that tie into why Webster Tarpley is in Donetsk. The articles are, Why Do Bankers Wage War to Stop National Banks? The complementary article is titled, State-Owned Central Banks Are the Real Target for West's Imperial Wars, where Turbeville explains the world banking cartel and the governments which they operate through are not only diametrically opposed to the practice of national banking, but they are willing to commit entire nations to wars and even to world wars to establish hegemony across the globe. Many activists who became rightly angered by central bank domination, and that anger then gave rise to the movement End the Fed. But here's the truth. The truth is that the bankers do not so much fear the ending of the Fed as much as the nationalization of the Fed. That word nationalization has been propagandized to seem socialist. It's not. It just means we control our own central bank. And that is what I see now in the DPR in Donetsk. Michael?
Yes, we should take some time probably to explore why they're more afraid of nationalization.
Okay, let's tackle this. Okay, well, the periods where we had nationalized banking created stability. When our national banks were dissolved back to private, that's when you had the booms and the busts again. The purpose of the Fed is to get reindustrialization, economic modernization, full employment, and rising standards of living for all the people. Contrary to monetarist fetishes, the value and soundness of currency in the modern world are determined by the ability of our national economy to produce physical commodities that the rest of the world wants to buy. I'll keep going for a second. Alexander Hamilton created the first bank of the United States, without which, the new nation would have collapsed into poverty and chaos and returned to British monetarist rule. The second BUS, or Bank of the United States, it's called BUS, was created by James Madison, again to ward off this same chaos. Then Henry Clay coined the term that we use at our party, in our organization, the American system.
The American system,
yeah. And it means, the definition is a national bank, a protective tariff, and national infrastructure financed by the federal government. The rise of the U.S. as the world's greatest industrial power came thanks to this protective tariff and controlled currency, the greenbacks. So, and we can go all the way up to JFK, who tried to revive the New Deal and break the power of the Fed and was assassinated by those financiers, with the help of the CIA. So,
yeah, let me tell you, the real enemies of economic progress are the Wall Street bankers, financiers, finance oligarchs, as we call them. If you let them control the government, the results are catastrophic. Not only because their activities are so far away from production, but because oligarchies are inherently uncoordinated. Usually they result in utter failure and chaos. We must fight to take government out of the hands of the bankers.
Yeah, and you've seen that firsthand in Greece, and we have to seize control of our Federal Reserve System and nationalize it as a bureau of the U.S. Treasury. A centerpiece of a recovery program would be the rebuilding and water systems, rebuilding of water systems, electrical grids, interstate highways, and rail systems, which is important for the states.
This, Daniela, should lead us to the Amtrak crash.
Exactly.
The
Amtrak. All right. You said it right. Amtrak. Yeah.
Amtrak crash. Yeah. Governor Bruce Rauner proposed state budget would cut 40% from Illinois' funding for Amtrak trains during a time when ridership, as I was reading, has been climbing.
Yeah, 40%. It's huge. While ridership's climbing, Rauner's budget proposes $26 million in spending for Amtrak, a cut of $16 million from the previous year's appropriation. And Amtrak spokesperson said the Rauner budget would likely lead to service reductions, like in Chicago.
In Chicago, in the state with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the world's largest derivatives market in the world. They want to save a few million by cutting train service.
Yeah, the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, does 1,000 more derivatives trades every year than Wall Street. For every one derivative that Wall Street trades, 1,000 are traded at the CME. And they can't finance a train system that we found a way to build 100 years ago. we have a morning briefing at the Tax Wall Street Party. Our morning briefing from the other day is titled